The Australian outback is a land of overwhelming, abrasive noise, the constant hum of insects, the crackle of intense heat, the endless sigh of wind over red dust. It is sound made tangible. But deep within the restricted zone of South Australia, there exists a place where that auditory reality utterly collapses. A place where the silence is not merely an absence of sound, but its active, violent opposite. Dr. Elara Chen, a radio astronomer specializing in exotic signal analysis, was hunting a statistical anomaly in the public satellite data from the late 1990s. The data showed a localized, recurring period of null transmission. Not interference, not equipment failure, but a perfect, impossible zero. All acoustic and electromagnetic activity, from deep space radio bursts to local terrestrial transmissions, vanished within a precise, fixed geographic point for short, erratic intervals. Her search led her to the abandoned Woomera Acoustic Research Array, WARA, a secret, black-budget facility disguised as a meteorological station during the late Cold War. The facility was designed to listen to the farthest reaches of the cosmos. The surface building was a ruined, rusting corrugated iron hangar, half buried in red dust and exposed to the relentless, intense heat. The only way in was through a long, steep metal staircase descending into absolute, perpetual darkness. Elara and her team, a silent drone and a shielded data logger, descended into the vast, circular subterranean chamber. The air was thick and heavy, smelling of ozone and old, dead machinery. In the center, dominating the space, was a massive, archaic 1980s radio telescope dish, angled straight up into the solid concrete ceiling. The chamber was silent. Not quiet, but silent in a way that defied physics. The gentle whir of the cooling fan on her own equipment was unnaturally muted, as if the sound waves were being physically choked. At the focal point of the massive satellite dish, Elara found the core of the anomaly. It was the central receiver unit, a perfectly smooth, obsidian-black metallic sphere. The sphere was neither hot nor cold, and it radiated no light, instead absorbing all ambient light to appear as a perfect, velvet void. The sphere was perpetually emitting the null field. The original WARA scientists, trying to listen to the sound of the universe, had accidentally captured an anti-frequency, a parasitic wave that actively consumes and nullifies all sound waves and acoustic energy within its localized field, replacing them with absolute, devastating silence. Elara quickly connected her sensors. The sphere was generating a complex, non-acoustic wave, a frequency that did not transmit information, but rather negated it. The sphere was not shielding sound. It was actively destroying it. She found the field logs of the original project leader, Dr. Silas Reed. His final, frantic entries in 1988 detailed the capture of the signal. It wasn't a stellar event. It was the sound of a place where sound cannot exist. We recorded the null point of the universe. And now it's here. It requires energy to maintain the null field, and it is consuming the only energy it recognizes: acoustic entropy. The phenomenon manifested immediately on Elara's equipment. A high-fidelity, high-end microphone mounted on a tripod near the sphere began to visibly degrade. Its protective foam windscreen started disintegrating and turning to dust, consumed by the anti-frequency wave. The sound wave itself, the potential for sound, was being violently neutralized. The next victim was the recorded history. Elara had brought a precious, recovered audio reel-to-reel tape, a test recording of a human voice made in the 1980s. She played it back. The sound was faint, distorted, and rapidly fading. As she watched, the metallic oxide coating, the recorded data, on the tape ribbon began to flake off the plastic backing. The null field was actively consuming the recorded acoustic information, erasing the sound from its physical medium. The voice faded to static, and then to a devastating, final silence. The sound's memory was being erased from the tape. The null field began to expand and intensify, its influence growing outside the subterranean chamber. The pressure it exerted was no longer just auditory, it was physical and structural. Elara observed the effect on a small, antique metal bell left on the concrete floor, a historical marker left by Reed's team. The bell was not ringing, it was imploding. Its structure was collapsing inward silently, the metal twisting and bending under the immense external anti-frequency pressure. The molecular integrity that allowed the metal to transmit sound was being destroyed. The very structure of the subterranean chamber began to yield. Large, geometric sections of the concrete walls were cracking, but the resulting rupture was silent. The pulverized concrete dust fell in a silent, dead stream. The anti-frequency wave was destroying the capacity of the stone to contain pressure, creating a silent collapse. Elara's own psychological state began to unravel. The constant, unnatural silence was suffocating. Her brain, unable to process or generate normal auditory feedback, filled the void with its own internal noise. High-pitched ringing, visual distortions, and eventually, the memory of sounds. The phantom sound of her mother's voice, her favorite music, the noise of the city. The Null Field was now trying to consume those memories. Elara would momentarily forget the sound of her own name or the pitch of her own voice. The anti-frequency was working backwards through her lifetime, eradicating her entire acoustic history. She was being reduced to an auditory tabula rasa. Reed's final warning was clear. The only thing that stops the Null Field is the chaotic energy of loud, discordant sound. It is a destructive feedback loop. It must be overloaded. We must defeat silence with true chaos. Elara knew she had to destroy the sphere or overload it. The problem was that any sound she created was instantly nullified before it could generate the necessary discordant feedback. She formulated a desperate plan. The old Woomera facility still had its massive 1980s-era seismic vibrators, huge industrial shakers designed to simulate earth tremors for calibration. These machines, if activated at maximum power directly beneath the chamber, would generate low-frequency, physical, kinetic energy that the Null Field might not be able to immediately consume as purely acoustic data. She rushed back to the surface, fighting the growing disorientation and the deafening, unnatural silence. The vast, flat outback landscape above the facility was now eerily still. The heat haze and dust clouds, normally swirling, were frozen in place within a perfect circle above the hangar, a visual manifestation of the Null Field expanding into the atmosphere. Elara reached the control panel and activated the seismic vibrators. The ground beneath the hangar began to tremble violently. The structure groaned and twisted, but the sound of the tremor was muted, flat, instantly absorbed by the expanding Null Field. Down in the subterranean chamber, the perfectly smooth black sphere reacted violently. It began to pulse, not with light, but with an internal, crushing vacuum. The radio telescope structure surrounding it rapidly vibrated and tore apart, the metal screeching a high-pitched sound that was instantly, violently muted. The seismic energy was reaching the sphere, but the sphere was fighting back, consuming the energy faster than the vibrators could produce it. In a final, desperate act, Elara threw her own fully charged, high-power data logger, a device capable of recording and playing back extreme, high-frequency sound directly at the sphere. The logger hit the sphere, and for one terrifying, split second, the Null Field failed. A blast of pure, unadulterated white noise, the sound of the universe collapsing, erupted from the point of contact. The sound was so loud, so discordant, so chaotic that it bypassed the Null Field entirely, overloading the anti-frequency generator. The black sphere exploded, not with fire, but with a sudden, localized implosion, followed by absolute silence. Elara was found hours later, deafened and disoriented, but alive. The Woomera Acoustic Research Array was a collapsed, silent ruin. The threat was gone. The Null Field was neutralized. But the field's final, discordant overload left an indelible mark on Elara. She regained her hearing, but everything was wrong. The world was saturated with the sound of static. Every time she heard a human voice, music, or traffic, it was instantly overlaid and distorted by a constant, high-frequency, chaotic white noise, the very sound of the universe collapsing that had overloaded the sphere. The anti-frequency had failed to consume the world's acoustic memory, but it had permanently damaged Elara's perception of sound. She could never hear anything purely again. Every sound was now accompanied by the sound of its own destruction. She lives her life in a world constantly being destroyed by noise, constantly struggling to hear meaning through the overwhelming chaos of the final, discordant echo. The ultimate horror of the null zone wasn't the silence it imposed, but the sound it left behind.